As if the weight of the days weren't enough, you wander through unseen halls where the footsteps of invaders echo, and each footstep is a judgment on who you are. In this fortress without walls, any starving beggar crosses the gates you never built and leaves carrying the gold that should be funding your dreams. No one needed to break anything down. You yourself left the doors wide open, trembling at the thought of seeming unyielding. Some call this kindness. I call it suicidal exposure. But from this point on, the veneer shatters, and the question that cuts like a blade emerges. How long will you allow pity to serve as a disguise for your own surrender? Observe the pattern that has been repeating since your first memory of pain. Someone makes a derogatory comment, and you immediately shrink, trying to mold your very existence to fit the expectation of someone who doesn't even deserve your silence. You pride yourself on being sensitive, but that sensitivity is nothing more than a pierced shield. Every time you seek approval in someone else's eyes, you hand over a key to the treasure. Every time you justify your sadness by citing empathy, you unlock another vault. The result is unavoidable. Your reign is plundered by those who wouldn't even dare to knock on the door if it were locked. Stop asking why the world treats you like a doormat and start asking why you lie down on the floor with such enthusiasm. The answer is simple and devastating. It's easier to bleed in a public square than to learn to wage war in silence. You chose the lazy path of self-pity disguised as a generous heart. Thus, every intruder feels authorized to spit on your non-existent walls. What seems like external cruelty is in reality internal laziness. Laziness to raise the stones of emotional discipline. Here is the truth that separates kings from servants. Power is not a gift. It is an interior engineering project. You are not born armored. You armor yourself. Each stone of that inner wall is called self-control, and each mortar is made of strategic silence. When you finally raise the first block, you notice the change in the air. The beggar hesitates, the false friend quiets down, the manipulator retreats. Not because you shouted. Shouting is the weapon of the commoners. They retreat because they sense that behind those new walls there is someone willing to protect their own territory with method and coldness. Your problem has never been feeling too much. It has been feeling indiscriminately. Emotion without a filter is a fire in a powder keg. Sooner or later, everything explodes. From now on, you will install floodgates in that turbulent river. You will learn to open the flow only when the water can move mills that generate real power. At other times, you will contain the flood behind steel gates. You will not become a robot, but a hydraulic engineer of your own soul. Who deserves the deep waters of your affection? Only those who prove through actions that they will not drown in them. Understand something crucial. Coldness is not the absence of warmth. It is the ultimate control over where the warmth falls. Imagine a sun that deliberately decides which fields will flourish and which will remain barren. You will stop being the light bulb for any nocturnal moth and become the laser that cuts steel. Concentrated energy, precise orientation, calculated impact. At each attempt to destabilize you, the aggressor will see only the tranquil surface of a dark lake. Only you will know that beneath the mirror of water, precise mechanisms move, prepared to counterstrike when and if it is convenient. Don't expect applause. The same audience that fed on your weakness will now feel hungry. Some will call your new posture arrogance. They will say you've changed. You will respond with the weapon that most infuriates the impotent, a contained smile and 15 seconds of silence. In that sound vacuum, the adversary will hear their own insecurity echoing like thunder. You will remain silent because every unnecessary word is a brick removed from the wall. Talking less means suffering fewer insertions from the enemy. It is an elite weapon, not one for show-offs. The purpose of this journey is simple to state and brutal to execute, to exchange the emotional cell in which you live for a throne of black stone. A cell is degrading comfort. A throne is discomfort that honors. For this, 3 precepts will be non-negotiable. First, govern your impulses like an enlightened tyrant, expelling any thought that dares to conspire against your peace. Second, treat all relationships as strategic contracts. If the balance is not mutual growth, terminate the agreement without drama. Third, value silence as one who guards ammunition. Phrases not aligned with your purpose must die in your throat before they are born. Perhaps you fear becoming too callous and losing what little tenderness you have left. Relax. Tenderness doesn't vanish. It simply submits. It ceases to be an unbridled queen and becomes a lady-in-waiting, appearing when summoned, retreating when the game demands neutrality. This is the difference between those who live through emotional jolts and those who navigate with an unwavering compass. The former react, the latter decide. To react is to surrender oneself. To decide is to proclaim oneself sovereign. Everything I describe seems abstract until the moment you test it for the first time. Try it today. Choose a common provocation, a veiled criticism from a colleague, sarcasm from a relative, and do not react. Observe, record, catalogue. Feel the venom, seek entry and fail, because there is now armor. The world will remain petty, but for the first time, you will be impervious. And in that impermeability, you will discover an unexpected flavor, freedom. The time has come to expose, without anesthesia, the thesis that will underpin every stage of this narrative. You will only achieve unwavering respect when you learn to confine your emotions to the territory that deserves to house them. Respect does not arise from grand gestures, but from the silent discipline that defines unbreachable inner boundaries. Whoever controls their own heart controls the rhythm of the universe around them. From this point on, each of the following parts will be another stone in the wall, another step on the throne. You can return to the comforting reading of sugary self-help books, or cross this corridor of damp stone and accept that in the end, you will emerge unrecognizable, denser, more lucid, more dangerous to any manipulator. If the second option appeals to you, keep your eyes open, because in the next part, we will unearth the hidden problem that keeps your walls crumbling before they are even born. You will see how an invisible crack in the emotional foundation makes the entire castle collapse at the slightest breeze. The torch is lit. Hold it firmly. We will advance through the darkness towards territories that few dare to explore, and when we emerge, the world will no longer be able to touch you with filthy fingers. Now decide, continue or retreat. If you have chosen to advance, prepare yourself. The map of this conquest begins to reveal itself, stone by stone, rule by rule, until nothing in you is vulnerable by accident, but only strong by choice. There is a blind spot in every gesture that you have repeated since childhood, a discreet fissure that the people around you have learned to exploit with the skill of goldsmiths. The modern name for this breach is need, for validation, but calling it that is almost a caress. In practice, it is a polished collar that you voluntarily wear so that any outside voice can steer your mood. It is in this exact place that the structural vulnerability of your castle resides. You measure your own worth by the reflection in the eyes of others, and any glimmer of disapproval in those eyes acts as a battering ram against your inner gates. Notice the irony. While you proclaim that you are free and authentic, you secretly fabricate small psychic contracts where you hand over portions of your power in exchange for crumbs of recognition. The error is subtle because it disguises itself as virtue. You believe that taking care of your social image is synonymous with civility. It is not. It is merely an addiction to acceptance. People who truly govern their own lives treat reputation as a strategic currency, not as a biological necessity. They can trade their image if it yields real power. Otherwise, they walk in the shadows without the slightest fear of appearing cold or distant. The hidden problem, therefore, is not the external attack, but the internal space you offer the aggressor, an emotional parlor where any opinion is received with a red carpet. You do not question the authority of the person giving the opinion. You simply lower your guard and let the criticism transmute into a decree, even if it comes from someone whose achievements do not surpass your own. When this happens, the invader does not need to scale any walls. You yourself knock down a few bricks for them to pass through. Machiavellian logic teaches the opposite. Never accept influence from someone who does not prove superior competence or strategic utility. But, intoxicated by neediness, you do the opposite. You authorize incompetent judges to legislate on your feelings. There is also the temporal component of this frailty. You react immediately without filtering because you confuse speed with intelligence. Instinct demands an instant response. The strategic mind demands a calculated delay. By reacting quickly, you give away valuable information. You show where it hurts, reveal which insults work, display which button to press to destabilize you. Machiavelli would warn, when the enemy is unpredictable, they are feared. When they are predictable, they become a toy. Your current emotional pattern turns you into an easy toy to manipulate. It is useful to map the symptoms of this blind spot surgically. Chronic feedback dependency. You only feel productive when someone applauds or criticizes you. In moments of silence from others, you crumble with insecurity. Preventive self-deprecation. To dodge harsh judgments, you crack jokes about your own shortcomings. You think it brings levity. In reality, it places you in a subservient position before the duel even begins. Compulsive comparison. Endless scrolling on social media becomes a daily gauge of your failure or success. Each like received by others is another blade that measures your self-esteem. Inability to say no. The fear of disappointing others leads you to accept tasks, invitations, and relationships that drain your vital energy, accumulating resentment that explodes in the wrong places. Martyr narrative. When the pain of pleasing others becomes unbearable, you take pride in your own exhaustion, trying to prove your worth through sacrifice. The result? No one respects you anymore. They merely use you with less guilt. Recognizing these symptoms hurts because it implies admitting that the wound is self-inflicted. There is no external villain. The real traitor resides in the mirror and bears the surname attachment. Every time it begs for affection, this traitor opens the window through which all the verbal arrows that pierce you enter. The cure, therefore, will not be found in any fluffy motivational speech, but in the incineration of this attachment. Before moving on to reconstruction, we need to adjust your internal vocabulary, because words are the building blocks of thought. When you say, "I need to be understood," you instill neediness into the concrete of your walls. Rewrite it as, "I accept being misunderstood if it preserves my fortress. When you convince yourself that every human being desires love, you adjust your compass to navigate towards others' harbors, not your own throne. Change it to, I desire selective love, the rest is noise. This lexical change is not cosmetic, it is mental engineering. Phrases shape synapses, synapses shape reactions, and reactions shape destiny. Perhaps an internal objection arises, but if I abandon this need, I will be ignored. Dismantle this fear. It matters less to be noticed than to be respected. Noticing is a passive act, respecting is an active recognition of power. And genuine respect springs forth when you demonstrate that the world cannot hijack your emotional climate. People gravitate towards those who govern their own internal weather. They feel secure around those who do not fluctuate because of insignificant comments. Now answer silently. How many important decisions have you made in recent years driven by the expectation of approval? That college degree, the purchase of that car, the hasty marriage, the job that makes you swallow sarcasm weekly? Add up the hours spent ruminating about what will they think. This emotional accounting displays the bill for your fragility. Years of existence offered as a dowry to a distracted audience for whom you are nothing more than momentary entertainment. Imagine then a reverse social experiment. For the next 24 hours, you will decide everything based on the following criterion. Does this increase or decrease my internal sovereignty? If it increases it, do it. If it decreases it, refuse. Prepare for turbulence. Close people will find it strange, perhaps criticize or ridicule you. Great. Each criticism will be a leak test in the ceiling of your newly cast walls. You will observe, without haste, how the venom hits the stone and runs off, useless. You will discover that most of the interactions that demanded your anxiety lose their meaning when you stop seeking external validation as proof of existence. Once the hidden problem has been identified, this slow corrosion, caused by the idolatry of approval, we need to establish the antidote. The remedy will not come in the form of jargon about self-love, but in concrete methodologies of emotional discipline. The first of these is the return to internal authority. Every morning, before submerging yourself in the noise of the world, declare goals that do not depend on anyone's applause. They should be measurable only by you. Reading a chapter, completing a workout, advancing a project. As you complete each step, resist the temptation to announce it. Silence transforms achievement into muscle. Boasting turns achievement into exhibition, and exhibition feeds the monster of dependency again. The second methodology is called relationship triage. List people who, in recent months, have occupied mental space disproportionate to the real value they offer. For each name, apply the Machiavellian criterion. Does this person strengthen or weaken my position? If they weaken it, reduce contact gradually and politely. If they strengthen it, invest strategic time. Remember, loyalty is a two-way street, not an infinite concession. A king who feeds snakes in his gardens is not practicing charity, but signing his own deposition. Finally, adopt the tire-controlled echo rule. Before reacting to any provocation, count to 50 in your head, breathing slowly. During that interval, visualize yourself seated on a throne of black stone while the provoker barks outside the walls. If, after the 50th second, there is still an objective advantage in responding, do so with a maximum of 3 sentences. The fewer the syllables, the more steel in the message. The ensuing silence creates a vacuum where the aggressor's mind gets lost, trying to guess what you're thinking. When they discover they have no map to your inner self, they retreat. At this point, the hidden problem is mapped, named, and partially deboned. In the next stage, we'll need to expose the specific weaknesses that serve as anchors for these emotional invaders. Minute details, daily gestures, facial expressions that betray your insecurity even before a word is spoken. It's like identifying cracks in the foundation of a tower. Only when you know every inch can you seal everything with molten steel. Keep the torch raised high. The corridor ahead narrows and darkens, but passage is mandatory. Those who don't traverse this stretch will live forever begging for scraps of affection. You, however, have already begun the irreversible step towards frigid self-sufficiency. Prepare to look in the polished steel mirror and see, with clinical clarity, the emotional surrenders you make almost automatically. When you understand each one, you'll be ready to amputate without pity, not to become less human, but to finally choose when humanity will be displayed and when it will remain locked in titanium vaults. We'll meet right there, where the dim light reveals every weakness, hidden beneath layers of habit. Bring courage, because the dissection will be meticulous, and remember, remaining vulnerable is always a choice. From now on, no longer yours. The silvery reflection of that steel mirror, which you raised at the end of the previous part, now returns, unsettling details that previously dissolved into the fog of routine. At first glance, everything seems solid. Shoulders raised, countenance serene, breath measured. However, it only takes a few seconds of observation to notice micro fissures, tiny yet numerous, through which the enemy infiltrates their invisible blades. The essence of this stage is to unlock every secret hatch that you, often without realizing it, keep wide open. Think of this chapter as a surgical inventory of vulnerability. vulnerabilities. If you leave a single point undiagnosed, the next invasion will be born there. Spontaneous sincerity as confession. Almost every casual conversation contains a moment when you open your heart to show humanity. In the romantic imagination, this gesture creates bonds. In strategic reality, it creates handles for them to pull you whenever they wish. Whenever you describe insecurities, regrets, or wounds to someone who hasn't yet proven loyalty, you hand over ready ammunition. Days later, this material returns in the form of sarcastic comments, emotional blackmail, or corrosive gossip. The weakness isn't in the mistake you made, humans err, but in the impulse to transform it into a public confession before consolidating power over the environment. Machiavelli would remind us, virtue may be real, but it must remain partially concealed until its display produces advantage. The face that bows before thought. Facial muscles betray your mind with the haste of a servant eager to please. An automatic smile surfaces when someone makes a joke at your expense, even if inside you're hurting. The eyebrow arches in doubt before an absurd order from the boss, signaling submission before the mouth articulates denial. These micro-gestures function as animated captions about your intentions. Any minimally astute observer reads, interprets, and files them away. Correcting this doesn't mean freezing your face into a robotic mask. It means practicing latency. An extra second of neutrality transforms any expression into a choice, not a reflex. The rush to fill silences. During meetings or family lunches, seconds of quiet seem claustrophobic. To alleviate the discomfort, you pour out unnecessary opinions, stories, or justifications. This involuntary chatter becomes a map of your passions and fears. Whoever controls the silence controls the tension. Whoever dominates the tension controls the rhythm of others. When you speak to avoid vacuums, you reveal a thirst for approval and a fear of judgment, two scents that predators recognize from a distance. The fluctuating moral compass. Their convictions shift and change depending on the company they keep. Among friends, they position themselves as staunch defenders of authenticity. Before their superiors, they morph into complacent diplomats. On social media, they embrace slogans that garner easy likes. This ethical and emotional pliability is noticed even if no one says anything. People respect those who maintain a steady course, even if they disagree with the direction. Frequent vacillations reek of a desperate need to belong, an invitation to ideological manipulation. The surplus of unsolicited explanations. Upon committing a minor slip-up, they unleash a torrent of justifications before anyone even questions them. It appears to be transparency, but it's a sign of guilt. In a tough negotiation, the opponent doesn't even need to apply pressure. Their defenses crumble preemptively. Those who master the game understand that explanations are valuable gifts to be offered only in exchange for concessions. Remember, this unoffered apologies maintain an air of mystery, and mystery sustains respect. The secret inventory of internal comparisons. They observe the achievements of others and recalculate their self-worth in real time. This habit generates mood swings that only they experience, but which leak out in their tone of voice, posture, and productivity. The internal rival, fueled by silent envy, undermines daring decisions. They hesitate because they fear exposure of relative shortcomings. This restraint deprives them of constructive errors and guarantees easy victories for competitors who take action, even if imperfectly. The physiological dependence on external stimulation. Their cell phone vibrates. Immediately, their hand darts for the screen. Each notification triggers floods of dopamine that forge chemical pathways in the brain. The modern adversary doesn't need to breach the castle walls. It sends alerts that hijack their attention. While they scroll through the feed, their strategic projects freeze. Discipline begins where compulsive responsiveness ends. Those who control their own rhythm cannot cater to the rhythm of others. The reflexive sweetness in the presence of authority. The mere display of rank, title, or wealth is enough to soften their voice and cause them to lean slightly forward. This unconscious display of reverence grants the other party an automatic advantage. Astute leaders recognize this signal and forever keep them under a glass ceiling. The antidote is to calibrate respect without subservience. Greet firmly, look directly, listen attentively, but negotiate terms, not beg for favors. Respect is not the same as idol worship. The romantic attachment to the past. Memories of old traumas or youthful glories form dual chains. One drags them into the depths of self-pity. The other anchors unrealistic expectations of repeating extinct achievements. In both cases, the present suffers neglect. External adversaries, sensing this nostalgia, offer triggers that reactivate wounds or vanities. Internal enemies, in turn, sabotage contemporary risks by using bygone scenarios as prophecy. Severing ties with what was liberates power for what could be. 10. The inability to process compliments. Oddly, many become so accustomed to criticism that praise disorients them. They try to reciprocate, downplay their merit, or return the kindness immediately, like a child who has received too much chocolate. This behavior signals to the other person that their self-perception still depends on external validation. The clever manipulator showers them with praise, appearing to be an ally but preparing the ground for a future request that they will find impossible to refuse. Internalize praise without haste, offer a concise thank you, and remain vigilant. Upon recognizing these 10 points, they may feel the weight of an emotional autopsy. This is normal. Each cited weakness operates at an almost cellular level, consolidated by decades of cultural repetition. However, do not mistake familiarity for destiny. The purpose of this X-ray is not to condemn them, but to arm their laboratory. Imagine that each vulnerability is now marked with fluorescent paint. In the upcoming sections, we will seal these fissures with alloys that withstand fire and ice. Before moving forward, a warning that worthy princes of the past received from astute advisors. The enemy learns as you learn. As they become more aware of their vulnerabilities, those around them also perceive fluctuations in their energy. Some will test the boundaries, others will try to re-establish old dynamics. Use these tests as field trials. If they fail, take note. If they resist, celebrate in silence. Internal applause is a sign of autonomy. Our next step on the stairway to power will require something that at first glance sounds paradoxical, deliberately breaking certain rules of social conduct that society romantically extols, but which, from a Machiavellian perspective, keep them domesticated. It will be the first official rupture, and for many, the point of no return. Prepare to confront attitudes deemed virtuous and view them under a merciless light. They may discover that much of the morality they embrace was designed not to protect them, but to keep them docile. The torch remains lit, and the corridor ahead echoes with the muffled sounds of hammers shaping a new breastplate. Enter without hesitation. Anyone who has come this far has already proven the courage to face their own shadows. Now they need even greater courage to shine spotlights on the shadows of others. A Machiavellian view of human behavior awaits you just ahead, as sharp as a freshly forged blade and as lethal as it is necessary. During the crossing of that narrow corridor, something in your perception starts to creak like a rusty hinge. It's no longer about shielding yourself from isolated insults, but about completely reconfiguring the lens through which you read every human gesture. Until now, the analysis has focused on the microscopic flaws that gave away your power. Now the study turns to the external environment. Imagine raising the visor of a medieval helmet and discovering that the war outside is not against giant monsters, but against ordinary men driven by predictable mechanisms. The initial disruption requires accepting, without romantic veils, three premises that Machiavelli has whispered since the Renaissance. Interest governs affection. People calculate gains before deciding whom to praise or whom to ignore. Fear shapes respect. Every individual measures with their heart the space between their desire and the possible retaliation from others. Vanity drives kindness. Almost every act of altruism carries a secret note asking for admiration in return. Recognizing these roots doesn't make the world a darker place. It merely illuminates what has always been behind the scenes. You will notice that sweet gestures often sprout from the fertile ground of ego, not from some supposed spiritual purity. The colleague who lends you a shoulder to cry on a bleak Tuesday might be planting an emotional debt to be collected on the Friday of a missed deadline. The casual compliment might be bait cast to hook your complicity in questionable schemes. Ignoring this social math is like growing flowers in a minefield. The explosion doesn't warn you before perfuming the air. Machiavellian thought doesn't condemn such dynamics. It simply puts them under fluorescent light. Instead of admiring or detesting, you observe. And by observing, you earn the right to choose when to participate in the game and when to flip the table. This is the first break, abandoning the sentimental naivete that insists on seeing generosity where there is only emotional bartering. Giving honey? Ask which hive it expects as payment. It's not about paranoia, but about strategic auditing. Whether to trust or not becomes a decision based on evidence, not on desires. To solidify this new perspective, practice motivation diagnosis. Each time someone offers you help, make a silent inventory of 4 possible currencies: status, information, future favors, or social protection. Detect which of these gleams in the eyes of the offerer, and you will already have half of that person's instruction manual. The mere exercise of discerning motivations immediately reduces the power of external manipulation, as every trick depends on the veil of surprise. As soon as you name the mechanism, it weakens. Another foundation of the Machiavellian view is the constant negotiation of fear. As children, we were taught to avoid conflict, as if universal harmony were an immutable principle. Machiavelli argues the opposite. Respect is not born from the absence of friction, but from clarity about consequences. Those around you assess, almost instinctively, whether opposing you will be cheap or costly. If the price is low, they will do it without hesitation. If the price seems uncertain, they will think twice. This notion doesn't require violence, just consistency. For example, denying an abusive request even once but firmly creates an aura of unpredictability sufficient for the request master to rethink future abuses. Remember, it's not the volume of the voice that establishes a barrier, it's the conviction that sustains the silence. Now examine more closely the lever of vanity. When someone praises you in public, your chest swells, a natural reflex. However, at that moment, the same person observes your emotional dilation and files the data. Here is a usable button. The solution is not to refuse compliments, that would sound arrogant. The solution is to metabolize them without addiction. Listen, thank them with a restrained thank you and let the air absorb the rest. Whoever expected showers of gratitude will understand that your internal circuits don't depend on live likes. With this, you cut off the fuel supply that would power future manipulations. These three cornerstones, interest, fear, and vanity, form an equilateral triangle of social control. For each person of significance around you, chart which point they prefer to inhabit. The insecure manager navigates from the point of fear. They threaten cutbacks or stifle ideas to bolster hierarchy. The desk colleague, however, chases the point of vanity. They are always sharing jokes and selfies, hoping for approval. The old ambitious friend orbits the point of interest, offering rides and invitations, thinking of opening future doors. Once you decipher the triangle, you decide whether to feed, redirect, or undermine the other's impulse. But there's a crucial detail. The most dangerous enemy dwells within you. Your own psyche responds to the same three triggers. Which one activates most readily? Perhaps it's vanity. You relish applause like fine wine. Or fear. You avoid conflict to maintain a false sense of peace. Or interest. You accept projects that drain your energy in exchange for a hazy promise of return. Mapping this internal pattern is an absolute priority because external traps only ensnare what resonates within you. The controlling boss thrives on a subordinate who dreads disapproval. The flatterer nestles where they find a hungry ego to sweeten. The opportunist seduces those who see magical shortcuts to swift advancement. Therefore, upon recognizing my primary vice is X, you install an anti-capture sensor at the precise spot that makes you predictable. The disruption then transforms into practice. Initiate the pulk resistance experiment. Choose for 72 hours to deny the primary currency that others usually offer to entice you. If your weakness is vanity, spend 3 days receiving compliments without expanding the conversation. Simply respond, thank you, and change the subject. If it's fear, gently confront one daily injustice, even if it's someone cutting in line or making an intrusive comment. If it's interest, refuse a small favor that promises easy profit but reeks of future dependence. Observe the ripples that form. You'll perceive who is bothered, who retreats, who attempts to sweeten the deal. It's the first real X-ray of your environment. Many smiles will vanish, and the clarity of those who genuinely value your presence will shine brighter. Machiavelli teaches that politics, and by extension human interaction, is the art of managing perceptions more than realities. By denying the point that always bought you, you alter the image reflected in the eyes of others. You cease to be a predictable extra and become an enigmatic figure. Don't be alarmed if they call it coldness. In reality, it's merely controlled temperature. Those who previously fueled themselves on your warmth will now sense a strategic winter and will need to offer firewood of authentic value to warm themselves. You might argue that such a posture will isolate you, but partial isolation is an acceptable price for mental sovereignty. Furthermore, emptiness attracts new fauna. People who respect boundaries will emerge naturally because they feel safe alongside someone who governs themselves. It's strange at first, like cleaning a square overrun with hungry pigeons. The quiet seems lackluster until the song of birds who couldn't endure the previous chaos arrives. Up until now, we've discussed observation, diagnosis, and rehearsing. New reactions. From the next stage onward, something more audacious will be required, projecting the archetype of the new self. It's not enough to remove old shards, it's necessary to forge a new statue. You will learn to compose an expression, posture, pace of speech, and daily rituals that communicate autonomy even before the first word is spoken. This archetype will not be a false persona, but the distillation of your most lucid version, a synthesis that will serve as both armor and mirror. When this internal model is clear, you will manage to align action and intention effortlessly, like a swordsman who makes the blade an extension of their arm. Therefore, hold the torch steady. The Machiavellian vision that you've just internalized does not demand cynicism, but offers clarity. It doesn't transform you into a bloodthirsty predator. It merely prevents you from remaining a docile prey. Walk a few steps forward, and you will feel the floor change. It ceases to be a damp corridor and becomes a spacious hall where we will sculpt, strike by strike, the outline of the rational, composed, and respected being who will reign over this entire labyrinth. We'll meet there at the center of the forge where the fire will be a friend and the hammer a maestro. From the symbolic forge where we arrive, the heat no longer burns, it molds. Previous stages have purged impurities. Now the remaining metal must assume its definitive shape. This will not be a temporary mask, but a fusion of flesh and steel, an archetype so coherent that any gesture will communicate silent power before the first syllable. This new self is not born of chance. It is a project of behavioral engineering aligned with Machiavellian principles, calibrated to inspire respect, avert vulnerabilities, and above all, sustain shielded inner peace. We shall sculpt it across 5 interconnected dimensions: physical bearing, body language, verbal architecture, daily ritual, and symbolic presence. Physical bearing, the skeleton of authority. The body speaks before the mouth. An erect spine, chin parallel to the ground, relaxed shoulders, deliberate steps, no erratic haste. Upon entering any room, plant both feet for a full second before moving. This micro-ritual signals that you assess the terrain rather than adapt to it. Arms never crossed as a defensive barrier. Hands either lightly clasped behind the body or resting on the table as if placing chess pieces. When seated, occupy the precise space that belongs to you, neither sprawled out in arrogance nor shrunken in apology. The secret is stable geometry. Right angles, a low center of gravity, deep breathing that inflates the abdomen, not the chest. Such posture generates a Pavlovian effect in observers. Firm stance, firm mind. They will trust or fear, but never ignore. Body language, silence, laden with command. Facial expressions now obey calculated latency. When someone provokes, maintain 2 seconds of neutrality before reacting. This delay instills doubt in the provoker. A smile emerges rarely, yet genuinely, not to please but to reward merit. A direct yet relaxed gaze, never fleeing to the sides. Machiavelli said that sight is the messenger of intention. Eyes that do not waver at the critical moment communicate unwavering conviction. Hand gestures remain restrained. Punctuate ideas with short movements. Palm down, a sign of closure, or palm slightly tilted, a sign of guidance. Avoid pointing a finger. Authority does not need gestural accusations. Verbal architecture, a blade without superfluous edges. The old habit of filling silences has been cremated. Your words now emerge as arrows of precision. Basic principle: short sentences, active verbs, clear subjects. Replace "I think we might perhaps consider" with "I decide that we shall do." A voice of medium timbre, firm projection, slow rhythm. He who controls the timing of speech controls the emotional cadence of the listener. Do not raise volume to gain attention. Lower it. When everyone leans in to hear, you have already won. Cut out linguistic crutches like, that leak power from the corners of the mouth. And remember to maintain strategic silences after key ideas. In this vacuum, the content reverberates like a bell in an empty temple. Now, daily ritual, discipline that does not waver. An archetype without routine is a sand sculpture. Your day now divides into 4 immutable blocks. Tactical dawn, waking at the same hour, early enough to conquer the still sleeping world. Hydrating, 10 minutes of box breathing, 4 to 4, 4, 4, to install mental fortitude. Reading a philosophical maxim that recalls purpose. Deep creation block, 90 minutes of uninterrupted work on the primary objective before opening emails or social media. Telephone out of reach. Here, castles are built, not other people's. Fires extinguished. Tribunal of decisions. A second session after a brief physical break, dedicated to delegating, rejecting, or agreeing to tasks. Use a binary checklist. Strengthens power, yes, weakens, no half answers. Nightly inventory. At the end of the day, 3 questions in a notebook locked away. Did I defend my boundaries? Was I predictable in anything? Was one of my silences worth more than speech? Adjustments for tomorrow arise from this detached self-assessment. Incorporating these rights cements an invisible reputation. Others will perceive, without understanding how, that your time holds the value of an imperial crown. Few will risk wasting. 13. Symbolic presence. Marks that precede entry. Minimalist attire. Cuts of neutral color. No garish logos. The elegance of power lies in the absence of fanfare. The objects you carry, notebook, pen, journal, follow the same sobriety. On social media, post rarely. Let results speak for themselves. He who displays too much routine invites judgments. He who displays key moments hints at depth. A concise email signature without motivational quotes. Symbols matter because the social brain loves shortcuts. By providing few, you compel people to sift meaning from substance, not decoration. Integrating the 5 dimensions. Now we visualize the complete archetype. A being who walks as if measuring land, speaks as if sculpting stone, and lives a routine that doesn't depend on applause. To ensure everything integrates seamlessly, apply the principle of coherence. Any element that clashes should be eliminated without pity. If your voice trembles, resume diction exercises. If your body slumps at the end of an exhausting day, retrain your postural muscles. If your social media slips into affected sarcasm, delete the post. Consistent coherence generates a reputation of stone, and stones don't ask permission to exist. Navigating social transitions. Adopting a new archetype causes discomfort in those who profited from the old one. Prepare for comments. You've changed. You're so serious. You've become arrogant. Recommended response: 3 heartbeats of silence, a small smile, a closing phrase. Evolving requires adjustments. Repeat as many times as necessary. People who insist on discrediting your transformation will reveal their true intention: to keep you tame. Distance will be a natural consequence. Advanced emotional shielding. Even the most robust statue can hide on a crack if hammered relentlessly. Incorporate micro-recoveries, 5-minute pauses with your eyes closed after intense confrontations, quick meditation in the restroom before a critical meeting, cervical stretches to release tension. These resets prevent adrenaline from corroding your armor from within. Authentic composure isn't absolute repression, but rather controlled release. The volcano maintains pressure in its core, but opens vents on its slopes to avoid exploding. Mirror of legitimacy. To mediate potential deviations, establish an internal mentor. Imagine yourself receiving a daily report on each decision. Ask, does this align with my archetype? If the answer comes out hesitant, you've identified an area of relapse. Correct it immediately. External accountability systems are useful, but none replace personal vigilance. Machiavelli warned princes about complacency. Decline begins with the first self-deception tolerated. Early fruits of the archetype. The signs of respect will arrive subtly. Interruptions in your sentences will be less frequent. Requests will come already filtered, fearing refusal. Gossip about you will stumble due to lack of traction. People will hesitate to spread rumors when they don't know which doors you control. Internally, you'll notice a dramatic reduction in baseline anxiety. Emotions still exist, but they obey. Key rotations decided by you. It's like going from passenger to pilot in your own nervous system. The statue rises, but a sculpture without a sword is merely an ornament. In the next stage, we'll sharpen silent strategies of psychological dominance based on Machiavelli, tactics that allow you to influence the environment without ever exposing all your cards. You'll learn to use silence as an offering, doubt as a trap, and concession as a future debt. After all, power isn't just about resisting, it's about moving the pieces so that resistance is rarely necessary. Keep the metal hot. No hammer will break it if you wield it with firm intention beforehand. Our journey continues toward invisible mastery, where the one who governs seems to observe from afar but controls every gear. Between the newly sharpened blade and the silence that hangs in the hall, there opens the moment to learn how to move the world without pushing it. Up to this point, you've erected walls, reshaped internal muscles, and donned the archetype of steel. Now you must master the board where the other pieces move. Machiavelli taught that the wise ruler prefers the subtlety of influence to the clamor of imposition. Brute force requires constant exertion, while invisible maneuvers reap rewards without revealing the gardener. You're ready to embrace this psychological agriculture. Here are 7 key strategies that, as discreet as mist, will shape the behavior of any circle you inhabit. 1. The gift with hidden thorns. Offer modest favors before they are requested. A piece of data that accelerates a colleague's project, a brief referral that opens a door for an acquaintance. It seems like altruism, but it plants a moral debt. When the time comes to propose something, mention the favor casually, or better yet, let the beneficiary's own memory recall it. The psychological debt creates embarrassment in denying the request. Remember to choose gifts that are useful but easy to withdraw if betrayal is revealed. Usefulness is a tie. Ease of cutting is protection. The cascade of alternatives. Never impose a single option. Offer at least 3 paths, all acceptable to you. The interlocutor will feel autonomy in the choice and at the same time will walk within a labyrinth that you yourself have designed. This technique shifts the tension of the decision to the illusion of control. In the end, any outcome strengthens your agenda. Skilled politicians do exactly this. They turn elections into menus. The inverted mirror. When faced with criticism or hostility, mirror the image back with a slight distortion that highlights the issue as contradiction. If accused of harshness, respond deliberately. I understand your discomfort. Discipline isn't always agreeable to those who prefer improvisation. There is no direct assault. There is reflection that exposes the aggressor's frailty. This game of mirrors turns accusers into defendants before their own rationale. The collapse of expectation. Make a habit of providing fewer cues than they anticipate. If they know you're versed in a certain subject, share only fragments, driving curiosity to a boiling point. People pay dearly in loyalty to satiate information gaps. The more controlled the silence, the greater the perceived value of what you choose to reveal. Planned scarcity transforms each forthcoming word into liquid gold. The protective shadow. Choose an influential ally and demonstrate how your presence shields flanks they didn't realize were vulnerable. Do this without public fanfare. Subtle evidence suffices, like data averting a crisis. The ally will begin to see you as vital insurance and, in return, offer cover when shadows attempt to strike you. It's the modern rendition of the invisible, advisor to the prince, seldom seen yet widely feared by those who know. The broken clock. Schedule important appointments 2 increments ahead of what you've planned for yourself. Arrive early, observe the empty setting, and catalog positions, doors, gazes, power dynamics. This Machiavellian head start ensures you're never caught off guard. Furthermore, your disciplined punctuality will forge a reputation for constructive predictability ability. Others will set their clocks by you, revealing anxieties before the conversation even starts. The concession that costs the other dearly but seems cheap to you. When yielding becomes inevitable, surrender something that appears significant but whose replacement is already accounted for in your plan. In exchange, ask for a commitment that demands the opponent's energy, reputation, or resources. Thus, you purchase allegiance for the price of a blank cartridge while they deplete half their arsenal. Concessions are trump cards when the relative cost favors you. Weaving the web without getting caught in it. Applying these tactics requires equilibrium between calculation and discretion. The mistake of amateurs is flaunting cleverness. The quieter the scheme, the greater the hidden admiration, and the lesser the overt resistance. Cultivate an internal signal. If at any point pride urges applause for the game, remember that visibility robs efficacy. Maintaining a neutral mask. Every silent strategy can fail if your face betrays excitement or premature triumph. Therefore, revisit the exercise of facial latency. After each successful maneuver, maintain an impassive countenance. An uncelebrated strike confounds observers. They sense the impact but can't pinpoint the origin. Mystery converts isolated victory into a lasting aura. Vaccines against guilt. Someone might whisper in your ear that certain stratagems sound manipulative. Machiavellian response: manipulation is unavoidable. The question is who controls the wheel. If your steering leads to mutual autonomy and not the enslavement of others, then it's called strategic leadership. Counterproductive guilt only serves to scorch energy that should be fueling focus. Controlled rehearsals in safe territory. Before testing these weapons in critical arenas, simulate. Use peripheral circles, social groups where loss is tolerable should you commit a blunder. Fine-tune pacing. Refine the perception of reactions. When the edge of the sword is perfect, then bring it to the main court. Machiavelli would compare it to rehearsing a battle. One trains on wood before wielding a genuine blade. Constant self-diagnosis. Power corrupts those who forget to audit their own motivation. At the end of each week, ask yourself, did these strategies serve to enhance independence or fuel empty revenge? Should the answer veer toward reprisal, you approach the foolish tyrant, not the clear-headed prince. Correct course. Sensible psychological mastery optimizes the ecosystem. It doesn't create a burning jungle. Integration with the archetype. The firm physique, the precise voice, and the shielded routine described in the prior section now fit like a sheath to these subtle blades. An erratic gesture spills all the poison on the wielder. Therefore, never apply a technique that demands a bearing you haven't yet mastered. Gradual growth ensures that each new tool finds a secure hand. The mesh has been cast, but it remains to solidify the emotional fiber that will keep you unwavering when the web is challenged. In the sequence, we will delve into calculated indifference, a tool that freezes attacks before they touch the ramparts. You will learn to meter emotional distance as a surgeon meters anesthesia. The patient sleeps, but the entire operating room remains under the control of the scalpel that vibrates in your hand. Now capable of weaving invisible webs through the simple positioning of words and favors, you must now ensure that the emotional fiber itself remains unaltered when the web is touched. This ultimate shield goes by a provocative name: strategic indifference. It's not to be confused with apathy or absolute clinical coldness. It's a psychic technique that measures emotional distance to protect mental resources, confuse the opponent, and increase the perceived value of your involvement when by sovereign choice you decide to offer it. The concept: distance as currency. Most people negotiate affection the same way children trade stickers. The more they receive, the more they give without calculating rarity. You, however, have already learned that any abundant commodity loses value. Strategic indifference operates as measured scarcity. By withholding reactions, it creates an aura of unpredictability that forces the world to invest more effort to obtain crumbs of your feedback. Social psychology confirms variable rewards generate more intense engagement than constant rewards. When your applause is rare, every minimal sign of approval becomes a coveted trophy. Difference between indifference and apathy. Apathy is the barren desert where nothing grows. Strategic indifference is a secret garden that blossoms only for those who conquer the key. The first reveals fatigue or depression. The second indicates self-mastery. Those who practice apathy err by absolute scarcity, severing useful bridges. Those who master indifference decide when and with whom to lower the drawbridge. Think of the architect who opens the lake's floodgates only to move the turbine. Controlled energy, not emotional waste. Immediate tactical benefits, breaking predictability. If interlocutors never know if their words will arouse euphoria or silence, they measure each phrase before uttering it. Energy protection. Absence of reaction blocks attempts at emotional draining, typical of manipulators who thrive on drama. Refraction of attacks. Insults hit and bounce back like a stone thrown against black water. The opaque depth returns neither echo nor trace. Valuation of presence. Whoever controls attention controls the narrative. Your participation becomes a rare and therefore unforgettable event. development, implementation, protocol, triage of stimuli. Imagine 3 mental drawers: irrelevant, useful, and essential. Any comment, notification, or compliment should be classified before penetrating your core. Irrelevant receives complete silence. Useful gets cold notes for later analysis. Essential deserves a calculated response, never immediate. 2. Controlled. Delay. Create a minimum interval of 30 seconds between a provocative stimulus and a verbal reaction. Use this microspace to observe the posture, tone of voice, and intention of the sender. Most of the time you will realize that the attack reveals someone else's neediness, not the truth about you. Your pause leaves the aggressor suspended in a vacuum of expectation. Many disarm themselves before even hearing you speak. The personal relevance filter. Ask, does anything in this interaction alter my power, my peace, or my plans? If the answer is no, discard it. Effective indifference is born of clear criteria, not laziness. When everything seems small, nothing weakens the wall. When everything seems large, the castle becomes a bustling hive. Selective delivery of emotional confirmation. When deciding to offer a positive response, do so in a minimalist way. A short nod, a good point, an objective email. Demonstrate recognition without opening the floodgates of enthusiasm. The world will interpret this concise gesture as a quality certificate. Practical scenarios. Corporate meeting. While colleagues engage in an ego battle over the microphone, occupy the position of the calm observer. Take notes. Maintain a neutral expression. When the manager asks for your view, return a panorama in 2 minutes with data and implications. End with a clear proposal. The contrast between the previous noise and your conciseness creates authority. Family life. A toxic relative launches a provocation. You've been very distant, huh? Instead of justifying yourself, respond in a soft tone, not distant, focused. Immediately afterward, change the subject. The short phrase eliminates ground for drama and reaffirms a key value. Focus. Digital environment. Social networks reward quick reaction. You do the opposite. Post less frequently. Never argue in comments. Respond to important messages at the time you determined in your daily ritual. This programmed absence transforms your timeline into a wall of proclamations, not a square of other people's noise. Conditioning exercises. News fast. 48 hours without news portals. To observe the initial craving. When you overcome it, you will discover that 90% of the bombs do not affect your life strategy. Silence in micro-conversations. In elevators or queues, limit yourself to a polite smile. Practice comfort in the sonic void. Stoic journal. Before sleep, record situations where you maintained indifference and the gains obtained. The brain reinforces rewarded circuits. Cold breath. Upon hearing news that would normally excite you, inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4, exhale for 4. This physiological reset prevents adrenaline from governing the mind. Pitfalls to avoid exhibitionist cynicism. Mocking everything betrays disguised insecurity. True indifference is silent, not sarcastic. Total insensitivity. Cutting off. Emotion indiscriminately generates a reputation as a useless stone. Remember, choose the moment. Don't eliminate the ability. Pride in being unreachable. Boasting sabotages the mystery. The mouth that proclaims invulnerability reveals a weak spot, the need to flaunt. Integration with silent strategies. Indifference is the soil where the seeds of previous tactics germinate. The gift with thorns, the inverted mirror, or the cascade of alternatives only work when your emotional temperature remains constant. If the opponent perceives anxiety or irritation, they interpret them as cracks to exploit. Therefore, whenever applying a Machiavellian maneuver, review the tripod. Neutral face, low voice, slow heartbeat. Home, signs of success. The attention vampires decrease visits. Drama loses the stage where curtains don't rise. You're invited to decisions, not gossip. They recognize that your focus is too rare to be wasted on trivialities. Opposition becomes formal. Criticisms come via polite email, not in public outbursts. They know that direct attacks ricochet. Your own mind decelerates. Thoughts stop jumping at the sound of every notification. You choose where to rest your awareness. Ethics of Ice Machiavellian craft admits power for power's sake, but you seek lucid autonomy, not tyranny. Use indifference to preserve internal territory and elevate the standard of dialogue, not to torment those who still live in afflicted need. If you refuse to answer, do so for a just cause. The coldness that protects can, in seconds, turn into cruelty that corrodes. Keep your moral compass checked in the nightly inventory. Did this absence benefit the strategy or hurt unnecessarily? Adjust if necessary. 7. Bridge to the next battle. A fortress isn't enough to remain standing. It needs to launch projectiles when surrounded. Next, we'll address how to master your own reactive instinct and appear invincible. Indifference offers shielding. The next step will convert the energy of impulse into lethal fuel so that even the most intense emotion is a servant, never a master. Prepare yourself. We will enter the laboratory where anger turns into traction and fear an opportunity radar. Subsequently, the torch that once served to illuminate will now serve to fuse emotions into an unbreakable alloy. There will be no more room for explosions, only controlled, planned, silent, but devastating detonations. The castle without walls has become a steel citadel. It remains to teach the cannons to fire only when the echo of victory is already certain. When the world's artillery fires provocations, most respond like exposed gunpowder. A spark is enough to detonate explosions of anger, fear, or despair that betray weakness. Your goal now is to convert this flammable stock into controlled fuel, worthy of a war engine, not a messy bonfire. Mastering the reactive instinct doesn't mean suffocating emotions until they sicken. It means redirecting them so precisely that any observer will conclude he doesn't lose control, he chooses the exact moment to use it. This generates the aura of invincibility that discourages future attacks before they are even planned. 1. Neurochemical mapping. Know the biological. Clock of impulse hormones are not enemies. They are messengers. Cortisol warns of threat. Adrenaline prepares muscles. Dopamine rewards progress. The mistake is in letting the entire war council give orders simultaneously. Start by recording, for 5 days, the times and contexts in which your pulse quickens, your voice rises, or thoughts ruminate. You will discover surprising patterns. Perhaps irritation always arises after long meetings or anxiety on the eve of deliveries. This physiological diary creates a mind map in the internal terrain. Without this recognition, any strategy continues to fire in the dark. 2. Transmutation technique. Transforming impulse into useful movement. Once the spark is identified, apply the displace, direct, discharge method. Displace, change the visual focus for 10 seconds. Place the palm of your hand on the opposite arm, recognizing temperature and texture. This simple gesture briefly disconnects the limbic circuit and reconnects the cortex. Directance, formulate an objective question. Which result strengthens my reign here? The brain, forced to think about consequences, retrogresses from reflex to strategy. Discharge. If muscle tension lingers, channel it into micro-contractions. Clench your toes inside your shoes for 5 seconds. You'll bleed off adrenaline without anyone noticing. Repeated dozens of times, the brain associates controlled adrenaline release with a neutral posture. To outside observers, it will seem that pressure doesn't affect you. Inside, the fire is driving turbines. 3. The tactical pause loop. Stretching 3 seconds into an eternity. Strategic indifference, seen in the previous section, acts as a shell. The pause loop is the internal mechanism that sustains that shell. Train yourself to respond to any unexpected stimulus with 3 seconds of absolute silence. To the aggressor, this gap feels like an interrogation room. They review their own words, project fears, perhaps correct themselves. For you, it's enough time to process the transmutation steps. This extended space creates the illusion that you think meticulously before each action, an attribute of legendary strategists. 4. Tempered steel language. Using the minimum, imposing the maximum. Once the impulse has been subdued, the verbal response should be refined according to 3 criteria: conciseness, consequence, closure. Practical example. Someone questions your decision in public. Instead of justifying yourself feverishly, you declare, "We analyzed scenarios. Here's the route that keeps the project on schedule. We will proceed." 3 sentences, no room for emotional debate. Anyone who still insists will be embarrassed in front of the audience by their own anxiety. 5. Escalating impact ladder. When to use emotion. Deliberately invincibility also requires knowing when to unleash intensity. If you never show fire, you'll seem like a cold machine, which can generate passive resistance. Machiavelli suggested a calculated dose of severity to maintain respectful admiration. Use the ladder in 3 levels: firm gaze plus grave voice. First, reprimand or defense. Prolonged silence plus cut in privileges. Second occurrence, controlled outburst of 30 seconds. Only time allowed in a long cycle. You raise your voice, stare firmly, detail objective consequences, and end abruptly by leaving the room. This rare eruption imprints on the collective memory that abusing your patience comes at a high cost. 6. Anti-commerce mental shield. Neutralizing masked personal attacks. Every reactive attack intends to hijack the narrative, making you explain yourself or defend yourself emotionally. Install a silent mantra. The comment reflects the sender. Did you hear an offense about a personal trait? Remember that the finger points more to the insecurity of the speaker. Visualize this image during the pause loop. The offense loses its potency as poison when you see it as an X-ray of the aggressor. 7. Physiological anchoring. Training in simulated environments. Excellence in reactions arises before the battlefield. Schedule weekly sessions of exposure to controlled stresses. 2-minute cold shower. Intense hit. impromptu speech recorded on video. During each exercise, practice box breathing and a slight smile. The body learns to associate stress with a composed posture. In real life, the same physiology will manifest itself without conscious effort. 8. Economy of speech. Post-confrontation, preserving aura and avoiding relapses. After neutralizing a provocation, resist the temptation to retell the victory to third parties. Narrating revives emotion, reheats adrenaline, and invites the ego to celebrate, the gateway to the next trap. Your reward is silence and the discreet fame that spreads on its own. 9. Internal alarm against belated vanity. Some days after a successful sequence of mastery, a subtle danger arises. Pride. You may feel superhuman and relax practices. Insert a daily reminder. One mistake negates 10 successes. Repeat while putting on your shoes or turning on the office light. This warning keeps the sword sharp. 10. Legacy of invulnerability. When the cycle of mapping, transmutation, tactical pause, and concise language becomes a habit, the environment begins to recalibrate its own energy. Criticisms turn into consultations. Gossip turns into discreet questions. Conflicts are brought to you only when they have already been filtered. Don't confuse this peace with the absence of risks. It indicates that the risk has migrated to the backstage where it doesn't consume your focus. It is at this point that invincibility is consolidated, not because you never fail, but because you fail less, correct quickly, and don't bleed in public. The internal wall now resists tremors that would have once caused it to collapse. However, power that is not renewed rots. In the next chapter, strategic persistence, staying strong. Even in chaos, we will learn how to regain discipline daily, even when circumstances swirl like a storm. After all, clear-headed princes not only win battles, they maintain the throne while the winds of history change direction. Storms don't send invitations. They erupt, tear off roofs, and test every rivet of the structure you've built. After disciplining instincts, transmuting impulses, and donning the unwavering archetype, the ultimate challenge arrives: sustaining that steadfastness when the external landscape shifts faster than your heartbeat. Strategic perseverance isn't blind obstinacy. It's the art of recalibrating your course without succumbing to panic. Like a prince navigating wars and plagues, you'll learn to transform chaos into a component of the mechanism, not an aberration that breaks the gears. 1. Structured flow mentality. The first step is to replace the pursuit of absolute stability with the practice of unstructured flow. Picture a river that runs perpetually, but whose stone banks guide the water. The banks are your values and rituals. The water represents variables you don't control. Economic downturns, superiors' decisions, mishaps. To persist isn't to dam the river. It's to ensure it never breaches the strategic boundary. Ask yourself, in the face of any turbulence, which non-negotiable pillars must I uphold, and which flexible details can I adjust? This distinction avoids both rigidity that cracks and malleability that turns into amorphous mass. 2. The triple review cycle. Machiavelli advised princes to review alliances and fortresses at fixed intervals because yesterday's reliability doesn't guarantee tomorrow's security. Transfer this wisdom to the personal sphere through the triple review cycle. Daily. As you conclude the nightly inventory, identify micro-deviations, reduced sleep, careless eating, an emotional reaction outside the norm. Correct it the following day before it becomes a toxic habit. Weekly. Set aside an hour to assess hard metrics, progress toward goals, finances, strategic relationships. If something falls below 80% of what's expected, chart an immediate adjustment. Quarterly. Examine the broad panorama. Ask, have the winds of the economy, the company, or the culture altered my position? If so, redesign the master. Plan without hesitation. A prince who ignores signs of an invaded border loses his castle in his sleep. 3. Energy reserve bank persistence requires fuel. Common people try to find it in the moment of crisis. Too late. You'll create energy reserves, one in 3 domains. Physical, regular workouts, but with planned peaks to develop cardiovascular reserves. In an emergency, your body responds without pilfering mental resources. Financial, a fund with 6 months of basic expenses shielded against superfluous desires. Saved money buys time for cool-headed decisions while others despair. Relational, robust contacts in different circles, professional, academic, community. High-trust mutual aid replaces fragile support networks based on partying and appearances. Before, micro-reset routine in the eye of the storm. When chaos tightens its grip, the mind demands flight or fight. Both exhaust quickly. Introduce a micro-reset that last less than 3 minutes but restore clarity. Mix 2-8 breathing. Inhale for 6, hold for 2, exhale for 8. Lengthening the exhale activates the vagus nerve and reduces cortisol. Sensory. Wash. Run cold water over your wrists while maintaining a fixed gaze on the stream. This thermal shock alerts the brain that you control the immediate environment even if the external world burns. Flavor anchoring. A bite of lemon or a gulp of strong coffee. The intense taste closes room rumination loops, forcing a return to the functional present. Repeat according to signs of fatigue. Elite military corps employ similar protocols on long missions. It's not a luxury, it's sustaining hardware. 5. Rule of 3. Simultaneous foci in chaos. The temptation is to resolve 10 fires at the same time, scattering gunpowder. Instead, apply the rule of 3 simultaneous foci. Choose one critical problem, one vital habit, and one source of renewal to concentrate daily energy. Critical problem. An issue whose impact threatens 70% of your board. For example, cash flow drying up. Vital habit. A practice that, if abandoned, causes all indices to plummet. For example, physical training that keeps hormones aligned. Source of renewal. A brief activity that recharges the spirit. Reading 10 pages of dense literature, instrumental music, meditative prayer. By limiting choices, you combat overload and keep the wheel of power turning without seizing up. 6. Tactic of the worst index day. Measure persistence, not on average days, but on the worst. Institute the cruel worst index day. The percentage of discipline maintained. When everything fails, short sleep, external pressure, illness. Example, if you still fulfill 60% of the routine in these scenarios, your index is 0.6. Work to raise it. Each additional point indicates that the walls withstand earthquakes. Machiavelli would evaluate armies in retreat. Whoever maintains formation under arrows deserves to lead. 7. Leveraging chaos as a stage instability offers a showcase for leaders who remain composed. Adopt the stance of an cool, organized bastion. While colleagues spread panic, you propose a 3-step plan, delegate tasks, and project serenity. Even if the plan falters, the simple act of displaying a compass ensures that others gravitate towards your voice. Authority stems less from absolute success and more from the ability to provide guidance when others' compasses spin aimlessly. 8. Strategic temporal distancing problems appear as mountains when pressed against our faces. Get into the habit of simulating a future biography. Ask yourself, how will this crisis sound in my 10-year autobiography? This viewpoint removes dramatization and frees the mind for solutions that wouldn't be seen through the lens of immediacy. Historians observe that victors plan campaigns thinking in terms of decades, not bursts of headlines. 9. Anatomy of controlled bleeding. There's unavoidable chaos where losses cannot be eliminated entirely. Employ controlled bleeding. Pinpoint which part of the project, budget, or ego can be sacrificed to save the core of the operation. Cut swiftly, publish an objective justification, and move forward. Ancient peoples opened canal sluices to save a city from flooding. You will open a small financial or relational vein to alleviate pressure. Whoever hesitates to lose an inch today risks losing miles tomorrow. 10. External auditor of realities. Even strategists can fall into self-delusion. Maintain at least one brutally honest confidant, a mentor, veteran friend, analytical, therapist. Share bi-weekly reports. If they perceive arrogance masked as confidence, you'll know before your enemies do. According to Machiavelli, the wise prince welcomes advice grounded in truth, but ignores flatterers who only inflate the ego. 11. Liturgy of austere celebration. After surviving waves of chaos, the mind craves celebration. Excessive revelry loosens, freshly tightened screws. Institute an austere celebration. Write down a lesson learned, allow a small indulgence, wine, a special dinner, and return to equilibrium the following morning. Thus, reward becomes a closing marker, not a gateway to premature relaxation. By consolidating each gear, the review cycle, energy reserves, micro resets, triple focus, and controlled bleeding, you build persistence as silent as a Swiss watch. Storms rumble, hands continue moving. The landscape around may crumble. Still, the internal compass sustains a rhythm capable of rebuilding ruins in record time. It remains then to crown this journey with a grand closing act, emotional closure, and a final command of transformation. The moment has arrived to weld all the pieces into an irreversible calling, a commandment that will burn bridges to any return to the fragile individual who existed at the beginning of this narrative. Let us advance. The torch illuminates the final chamber where we will crown this metamorphosis. The moment arrives when every step taken up to this point converges like mighty rivers into a single estuary, the point of no return. Everything you have forged, internal walls, iron archetype, the silence that governs, the discipline that weathers storms, must now condense into a final decree. A decree not just spoken, proclaimed into the very fabric of reality, sealed by decisions that incinerate bridges to any attempt at regression. It is the signature of sovereignty that transforms daily practice into enduring identity. Visualize the main hall of the castle you have rebuilt. Torches blaze on the darkened stone walls. Upon the central table rest symbols of each conquest. The pen that wrote the nightly inventory, the watch that measures your pause loops, the notebook where you sketch the boundaries of structured flow. Each object emits a subtle warmth, reminding you that discipline was not theory but action repeated until it became bone structure. However, the gesture that crowns the work is still still missing, the silent oath to wield power without ever succumbing to the allure of one's own strength. Let us begin with emotional closure. Many believe that becoming ruthless requires amputating feelings. You have already understood that emotion is a blade that decides whether it cuts the adversary or its own owner. The key, therefore, is not to extinguish it, but to subdue it. Place your hand on your chest. The heart beats firmly, not coldly. It is the fruit of living blood that refused to be spilled in pointless sacrifices. Acknowledge without shame the legitimate pride of still possessing sensitivity, now treated as a family jewel, displayed only on occasions where it generates genuine alliance, never in arenas where it would be used against you. This is the nobility of the new sovereign: to feel with selective depth, to love with lucidity, to forgive with discernment, never out of convention. Let us move on to the command of irreversible transformation. It is structured in 3 orders directed at oneself, short and absolute. My emotional territory is inviolable. From this moment forward, any attempt at intrusion, be it familial blackmail or corporate sarcasm, will be treated as an act of war. Your response will not be hysteria, but protocol, silence, analysis, a proportional countermeasure. You do not ask for respect. You command it through the consistency with which you defend your inner boundaries. My presence will be a rare commodity. Gatherings, relationships, remarks. Everything will be filtered through a sieve of strategic relevance or deep affinity. By limiting exposure, you transform each appearance into an anticipated event. The perceived value multiplies, and your very voice resonates more profoundly when it emerges sporadically. Squandering social energy becomes a betrayal against the crown you bear. My decisions will adhere to non-negotiable values. Define in writing 3 core tenets, for example, sovereignty of time, reciprocal respect, continuous expansion of competence. Any proposal that violates these axes receives an automatic veto. Such rigidity streamlines choices, conserving mental energy and shielding you from brilliant yet corrosive temptations. Having pronounced these commands, you seal the decree with a symbolic act. A practical suggestion: open your planning notebook and write at the top of the next page, Lex Regia, the royal law. Transcribe the 3 sentences and sign with the date and time. Machiavelli would remind us that a treaty only gains power when recorded. This shall be your treaty with yourself. Now allow yourself to perceive the horizon from a new vantage point. Conflicts will persist. People will persist. The world's unpredictability will not bend to your calendar. The difference is that from this day forward, any wave of chaos will encounter living rock, not shifting sand. You will not seek resounding victories to prove strength. You will pursue silent triumphs that affirm internal supremacy. Occasionally, someone will find your sparing use of words peculiar, your composure when all others are scrambling. Let them wonder. Mystery is a king's bodyguard. However, every reign requires a purpose greater than mere self-defense. Persisting solely for power is exhausting. Therefore, choose a work worthy of your newfound stature, an enterprise that uplifts the community, a book that records principles, a familial legacy built on discipline and lucidity. The true sovereign measures worth not by the number of kneeling subjects, but by the quality of the world that remains standing after their passage. Make self-control a tool for multiplying excellence, not for cultivating paranoia. Before closing the gates of this text, perform one final exercise of consolidation. Projection in 3 phases. Visualize yourself a month from now facing the first real test after this training, perhaps a public provocation. See yourself applying the pause loop, a concise response, an upright stride. Mentally advance to 1 year ahead. You are negotiating something you once deemed intimidating. You listen, speak little, become a beacon of serenity. Finally, 7 years pass. Your reputation is synonymous with consistency. People mention you in rooms you haven't even entered, saying, "He never wavers." This mental pathway etches roots in the brain. When the dates arrive, the path will seem familiar. We have reached at last the shore where it all began. Back then, you were a castle without walls, treasures plundered by emotional beggars. Today, the ramparts rise in exact geometry. The gates obey a keyword, and above all, within the hall echoes a majestic silence, the unmistakable sound of absolute dominion. It was not fate. It was a conscious choice reiterated day after day. Humanity continues, but under cool command. The heart beats, but chooses for whom to bleed. The mind thinks, but decides when to reveal its thoughts. It is here that you become a living legend, not because you are stronger than everyone, but because you have made it impossible for others to know where or if you can be wounded. The bell tolls, the torchlights dim. It is time to close this tome and open the chapter you will write with actions. Remember, each morning the world will ask who governs your fortress. Answer without words, with posture, silence, and decisions aligned with the Lex Regia. May your presence remain rare, your mind a blade, and your legacy transcend any boundary of time. If this content resonated with you, reciprocate now. Click subscribe, leave a like, and write in the comments where you are watching from. Until the next step in your evolution.